Good afternoon. I want to welcome the almost 420 local leaders that have registered for the call this afternoon. I am John Robert Smith, former mayor of Meridian, Mississippi, where I served for 16 years. And I am really pleased that so many of you have joined us today. I know you're busy, and you stopped today to be a part of this conversation, which is all about discussing a new initiative to help America's small and mid-sized communities. And we did not create this. Mayors and council members created this because over the last few months, we have sought the input of local elected officials, including a number of you on this call today, and I want to thank you for being a part and giving us your best guidance for the future. The purpose is to create what we call the first and main blueprint for prosperity in America's local communities. Everyone should have received the blueprint in your email, but if for some reason you didn't, we'll be following up with an email that will include that link. The blueprint itself contains over 30 proposals that you have told us are critical for providing your communities with the help you need to rebuild and remain competitive in today's economy. Today we want to tell you about that blueprint, tell you about our strategy to enact that blueprint, and then we've got to have your help to make it happen. So we hope to organize hundreds of local elected officials across the country, red states, blue states, small towns, medium-sized cities, rural places, counties. And we want them to publicly support the blueprint and work together to enact these common-sense solutions for our cities. Today we're joined by three mayors from Georgia, West Virginia, and Louisiana, and they're going to tell you why they are part of this effort. They're going to share their own personal stories of how a program in the blueprint helped their community. That's three stories, and while those three stories will be compelling, we need your voices joined to that. So at the end of the call, we hope you will commit to join the effort, share your story, and then help us identify other local elected officials to support First and Main, because when we have hundreds of voices united, that's not only powerful, it changes votes on Capitol Hill and may change the direction from the administration. So I want you to feel free to use the chat box to send your questions at any point during the webinar, or you can email us at info@firstandmain.org. We're going to answer as many of those questions as we can during the last few minutes of that webinar. All right, the First and Main blueprint has three tracks. One is protecting the programs proven to work for your local communities. The second is improving those programs that should be more effective and can be. And the third is creating new programs to provide local communities with additional resources. Local elected officials have told us that you see deep inequities in the health, transportation, and economic development outcomes that result from federal investments in your communities. Those inequities mean that too often many small or mid-sized communities are simply left out. The blueprint identifies 36 specific programs that local elected officials have told us will help address these inequities. These proposals include broadband internet access, water and transportation infrastructure, affordable housing tax credits, and new what we call Anchor Institutions Initiative, and expanded and improved rural development funding. These programs are threatened by both budget cuts and proposed reforms that would make them less useful to small and mid-sized communities or discontinue them altogether. Now is the time for Congress and the administration to hear from local elected officials about the value of these programs. You know, you will hear both Congress and the White House say small towns, mid-sized towns, rural America, they're important to us and we're going to be there for you. Well, they're not going to pick up the phone and call you, so you need to join your voices so that they can hear what you actually need. It's the only way they'll know. And to do that, we have three mayors who will talk to us today and share their stories. The first is Mayor Robert Rickert, who is serving his second term as the mayor of Macon-Bibb County, a unified government in Georgia. He is the first mayor of this new government, and so has had to craft many of the relationships and the policies to make this new government be responsive and work, and he has certainly done that. I've been to Macon a number of times, and it is a vibrant community with a great economic future ahead of it. I was just visiting with Macon and Mayor Rickert and his colleagues today from the region, and they're excited about their potential future. So I want to ask Mayor Rickert to discuss some of the threats to small and mid-sized communities due to these proposed budget cuts and share the impact of these cuts on his community. Mayor Rickert.
John Robert, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be part of this webinar today and have this opportunity to say a few words about my community and why I think that the progress that we've made over the last 15 years or so may not continue at the same pace if some or all of these federal programs for economic and community development are eliminated or dramatically reduced. So let me start by saying that Macon, Georgia is just like a lot of other cities. We have an historic downtown and a bright future that's associated with a walkable urban model of community development. We recently consolidated our city with our county, as you just mentioned, John Robert, and we have a community now of about 150,000 people with a single government consisting of a mayor and a 9-member commission. We're located only 85 miles southeast of Atlanta, but we're a world apart. Our quality of life and cost of living and unique identity and sense of place combine to make us an attractive community. And music has been quite prominent in our development, but it took more than music to help us grow. We applied for federal grants to leverage private investment. I'd like to give some example of the dozens of federal programs that are now threatened by the administration's FY19 budget proposal and infrastructure plan. These programs are critical to local communities across the country. I'm going to present some examples of how these federal programs, which could be eliminated or drastically reduced, have been a benefit to Macon-Bibb County. First, we have long been an entitlement city with a direct allocation of community development block grant funds and home funds. We have a variety of neighborhood improvement efforts that are funded with this grant money. These programs typically leverage additional private sector investment of money and time and have benefited Macon and a lot of other communities across the country. But now they are threatened and could be eliminated. Also, we were selected for the second cohort of the Strong City, Strong Community initiative and worked with the FRA to develop an emerging corridor for Amtrak service between Macon and Atlanta. But now Amtrak funding for corridors outside the Northeast is threatened, directly impacting transit-oriented design communities like we are trying to be. We applied for and received a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, as well as an EDA grant from the Economic Development Administration, an EPA grant for Community Building Blocks Technical Assistance. These grants have been transformative, but now they are threatened and could be eliminated. Here's a great example. The East Macon Arts Village was a vision of the Macon Arts Alliance and incorporated the revitalization of employee housing for a now defunct cotton mill into an exciting opportunity for an arts neighborhood. Utilizing the input initially developed from an EPA technical assistance workshop, this was phase 2 planning session and an NEA Our Town grant for $134,000. The Our Town grant hired a project coordinator and allowed funding for a cultural master plan that has now helped foster an overall $4 million investment in this neighborhood with a green space park that enters into Okmulgee National Monument, which is part of the National Park Service. So next, here are some images from the lofts at Capricorn, which are 120 units of market rate housing located adjacent to the original recording studio where the Allman Brothers Band and Wet Willie cut many of their great songs. It is a great example of attracting private investment to transform a deteriorated part of town into a bustling neighborhood. The EPA Building Blocks Technical Assistance Grant helped make the case that in-town revitalization was the most cost-effective way to develop our community. I mentioned our efforts to get passenger rail service in the emerging corridor between Macon and Atlanta, but funding for Amtrak is proposed to be eliminated in all sections of the country other than the Northeast corridor. Community development and economic development go hand in hand, and an EDA Public Works grant for infrastructure at our I-75 Business Park has led directly to investments by Tyson Foods, Tractor Supply, and FedEx. This investment helped bring Amazon to our area, and a new fulfillment center is under construction. Overall, we have created 1,100 jobs in the last 12 months, and that's something to sing about. But this kind of progress is vulnerable to penny-wise, pound-foolish budget cuts. On the local level, in communities like Macon-Bibb County, all across the country, we need federal grants to incentivize private sector investments. I want to be a part of making this case to our members of Congress, and I hope you do as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Rickert, and thank you for sharing your story with us and for focusing on the great opportunities that await for your community, but for an engaged federal partner. I first met Mayor Steve Williams when I visited his hometown of Huntington, West Virginia, to deliver a technical assistance workshop for the mayor. Lovely downtown, vibrant community on a river, in the mountains. What a beautiful setting for future growth for your community. Mayor Williams was reelected to a second term in 2016, and it was under his leadership that Huntington was named the $3 million grand prize winner of the American Best Communities competition in April 2017. Mayor Williams will discuss why local-federal partnership is critical to the success of local communities and to discuss how his community has engaged with the federal government. Mayor Williams.
Thanks, John Robert. It's good to be able to join you on this panel discussion. Huntington is, as it's indicated, is a population just shy of 50,000. We're the second largest city in the state of West Virginia. I think the slide says third largest. I didn't look closely enough to make darn sure that it's accurate. But we're the second largest, and we're standing notice that we're probably going to be the largest after the 2020 census is completed. We're located along the Ohio River Valley as the Ohio River comes down from Pittsburgh, starts to bend its way up towards Cincinnati. We are right at the location where Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky come together, and right at that point where the river hits to Cincinnati. As John Robert pointed out, we are a historical railroad city as well as a river city, and what we've been working on is rebounding our economy and trying to revitalize ourselves, and that's really what led to our participation in the America's Best Communities competition. So the question is, why First and Main? Why would that actually resonate with your community? Fact of the matter is that, as I have said to our federal partners, is that there are a lot more of us, of mid-sized communities, than there are the large cities out there. And we are the birthplace of innovation throughout the nation, because we have engaged residents who care and want improvement in their community. And as a result of that, we have revitalization opportunities that will strengthen neighborhoods and create jobs and improve our quality of life. What we see in Huntington, as I have said about communities, is that the difference is nothing but zeros. Is a community of 5,000, whether it be 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, or 5 million, The only thing that differentiates Huntington, West Virginia, just shy of 50,000, and New York City are the zeros. We're still dealing with the same issues. The challenge is that we don't have the resources that a New York City or Chicago or Philadelphia has. But one thing that we do have is that in our size that we can move quicker, we can move more efficiently, and because of our economy of size and scale, we can identify sooner what works, and we can correct even quicker what doesn't work. So when we're talking to the federal government, we're talking to them about partnerships. We've had federal partners to come in to meet with us, and the first message that I delivered to them, just as I'm sure so many of you do when you're speaking with your federal partners, is that if you think that you're going to come in to meet with us and tell us what we need, we might as well finish this meeting right now. We know what we need. What we need are partners who can show us different ways to be able to get there, and who will be willing to speak handily to that. So local governments depend upon a strong federal partner to support our revitalization goals. Federal funding provides critical support for local transportation, economic development, housing, parks, arts and cultural activities through appropriations or tax incentives. Infrastructure spending is what makes or breaks the local community. I just left a meeting at the White House, and they were talking about the money that was being spent, and I was being polite at the White House, but I wanted to jump up and say, well, if you want to make sure that it's being spent efficiently and effectively, then send it to the local communities, because that's where innovation is being developed. This is the reason for First and Main. A couple examples of what we've been doing in Huntington is that we've been able to partner with the U.S. EPA for brownfields resources, the Economic Development Administration, the EDA for Public Works financing, and the Appalachian Regional Commission for power grants. Is that what we have is a 75-acre historic heavy industrial site. The last time that it wasn't a heavy industrial site was in 1870, and that was the year before Huntington was founded. And for all of these years since 1871, it's been heavy industrial, but it's been sitting vacant for the last 20 years. And Justin, as in our town, as in many of your communities, there are some properties, there are some buildings, and even individuals hiding in plain sight that we get used to going by day after day, and after a while we become blind to it, and we also become blind to the talent that we have. And the opportunity that we have for revitalization is by partnering with the EPA on brownfield sites, with the Appalachian Regional Commission. We're right in the heart of Appalachia, or the Economic Development Administration, to talk actively about what we can be doing to revitalize programs that have just been sitting long vacant. We have another area, neighborhood in our community that has been a historic public housing project. It was built in the 1930s. An ancient public housing project that became, while it continued to provide housing to those who needed it, it also ended up providing shelter and a safe area for people to be able to conduct crime and be able to deal drugs. What we've been doing is working with the local housing authority to tear down that building, and as a result, we've been working with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and HUD just recently assigned, out of six awards for the nation, a Neighborhood Choice Award planning grant was awarded to us to be able to utilize for this area. We've also been working simultaneously with the U.S. Department of Transportation, where we got a Tiger planning grant to be able to put plans together, because we have a major thoroughfare coming right down the middle of our city, We have a challenge where we want to have the efficient transport of vehicles in and out of the city to Interstate 64 that goes by our city. But the problem is this 5 lanes of traffic cuts right down the middle of a neighborhood. The beauty of the partnership is that we were able to call the Department of Transportation and talk to the Undersecretary of Transportation and be able to talk to them very directly about this problem and say, once again, we knew what our need was, we just didn't know how to get there. And they were able to show us how they would be able to assist us in that regard. The National Endowment for the Arts is also providing future Our Town support as well, because we know that the arts plays an active role in quality of life, but also in what you're doing to be able to promote economic activity. So once again, why First and Main? If we're going to do this, we have to have a blueprint for local economic prosperity. Mayor Rickert showed where the money is starting to be diverted to elsewhere. If we're going to come back and talk about this, the next speaker will go into more detail about First and Main, but we have to have a blueprint. Recent passage of the federal government shows that $131 billion over the next 2 years is going to be spent. We need to be able to communicate to the federal government that we know what needs to be done, what improvements need to be made, and what's missing at the federal level. Let me speak just directly to every mayor, county executive, and town supervisor and any tribal leader that's present. Know this: we are where the rubber meets the road. Nobody understands the issues more than us, and we should never, ever allow ourselves to think that we should run short shrift or bow down to federal bureaucrats or federal leaders to ask permission for us to do something. We need partners. We don't need directors. And First and Main gives us a blueprint to be able to speak strongly and speak strongly from our own experience as to how we might be able to move forward. The First and Main blueprint identifies how the federal government can help communities prosper. Thanks for giving me the time to be able to chat with you.
Mayor Williams, thank you for those comments, for sharing your story. Thank you for being at the White House today to also raise your voice there. And we're going to have to raise this united voice in multiple ways, and I appreciate that both you and Mayor Rickert are a part of that, and I believe your inspiring stories will draw others. We've heard 2 of the 3 stories we're going to hear, and they're compelling stories, and they lead us to discussion of the blueprint. And the blueprint, as well crafted as we believe you mayors have helped us make it, without implementation, that blueprint is merely an aspirational good intent. Now I'm going to call on our partner from Sustainable Strategies, the CEO of Sustainable Strategies, Matt Ward. Matt, talk to us about the strategy to take the blueprint to implementation and to action.
Thank you, John Robert. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with Mayor Rickert and with Mayor Constant, who we're going to hear from Gretna, Louisiana, and the mayor of the great city of Huntington, West Virginia. We're sitting here in Washington, D.C. together with Steve Williams, but I happen to grow up in Huntington, West Virginia, so it's a real honor to be here. I'm going to just start out by saying, it has been said that communities can be shaped by choice or they can be shaped by chance. And we cannot leave to chance that the federal government knows about the programs that are making a difference in Macon and Gretna and Huntington and all of your communities. We really need to make the choice. We need to raise our voice and make sure they understand why these programs are important, why we need partners, and why reducing or eliminating these programs will really, really affect our national momentum and affect these communities. I want to tell you that all the good stories that Mayor Rickert of Macon told, all the good stories that Mayor Williams of Huntington told, all those programs are slated for elimination in the president's budget for the coming year. and none of them are necessarily safe in Congress. So that's why we need to raise our voice. We have developed the first and main blueprint, Blueprint for Prosperity for America's local communities. We've actually been working on it for more than a year since the election, and we've really brought it to a head over the last couple of months, working with many of you. It's been developed by and with local elected leaders and their key staff, city managers and economic development directors and planners from all across the country. It's focused on those programs that are really going to make local revitalization happen. We want to protect programs that are proven to work, improve programs that can work better, and create a handful of new programs to provide local governments with additional resources to drive their local revitalization. There are 4 principles that kind of back all of this. Number 1, we want to support locally driven revitalization. Mayor Steve Williams talked about that. Second, we want to build vibrant, healthy, and walkable towns and cities and counties across America. We want to focus on small and mid-sized communities. I think Mayor Williams is right that it's just a matter of zeros. What can help revitalize Los Angeles can also revitalize, the city of Branson, West Virginia, which has 4,500 people. But truly, it's the small and mid-sized communities that were critical in this last election. There's a message that we want to lift up places that have been left behind. We want to lift up places that might not have the resources to do it on their own. But you know what? You can't kill affordable housing and infrastructure and CDBG programs and expect these small and mid-sized communities to move forward. So that's our third message. And our fourth principle is that infrastructure can make a difference and create lasting value in our communities. Okay, so with that, we really identified about 136 federal programs that would make a difference, but that's too many to carry and focus on. And so we are looking at programs in 5 areas and 36 programs. These are appropriations programs. These are tax incentives. These are other sources of assistance that can be provided to communities to make a difference in the 5 areas of redevelopment and revitalization, economic development, downtowns and core neighborhoods, housing, and then infrastructure. And so, I know that John Robert Smith told you, and I'm going to say again, if you go to www.firstandmain.org, you can download the blueprint. If you haven't already, you can get details on all 36 of our proposals, and that's what we're focused on for this campaign. Okay, under redevelopment and revitalization, we're talking about tax-exempt municipal bonds. Believe it or not, there's been talk about ending those, although they've created $2 trillion in value in America. New market tax credits, historic preservation tax credits, they're only safe for another couple of years. They almost got killed this last year. Smart Growth America has a great idea about a neighborhood rehabilitation and investment tax credits. That's a new program we'd like to talk about. And then the EPA brownfield grants have made a difference for 20 years. They're bipartisan. They were brought into law by George W. Bush. We can't let them go away because they're really sparking revitalization. The second area in economic development, EDA, proposed for elimination. Their public works and economic adjustment grants are making a huge difference. You heard Mayor Reichert say that in Macon. USDA rural development for those areas of less than 50,000 people across America that are considered rural. Appalachian community renewal. There has been a focus in the last year or two on bringing new resources to Appalachia. We want to expand that to $1 billion a year and make sure that Appalachian communities, which are lagging behind in education, health, employment, and poverty, have resources to move forward. We talked in the campaign, we continue to talk about manufacturing as a key. The Manufacturing Extension Partnership is only $150 million a year. It's been proposed for elimination by the President. House Speaker Paul Ryan has said that we should eliminate it. There's more than 100 MEP centers across the nation that are helping 1 million small businesses innovate in manufacturing. we need to keep it going. And then we need the workers to be able to put into manufacturing and high growth sectors and family wage jobs. The Department of Labor has the American Apprenticeship Program and the America's Promise job-driven grant program. They're $100 million each. They're critical to helping create, workers who are going to be skilled to take the jobs of the future. They are stalled. They have not been issued in the past 13 months, despite a congressional authorization that there should be programs for apprenticeships and the America's Promise. They're stalled. They're stuck. They're not being issued. So we want to make sure that we're calling for those kinds of resources. If you look at rebuilding downtowns and core areas, the HUD Neighborhood Renewal Funds, that's the community, the Choice Neighborhood Grant that Steve Williams in Huntington won on Monday this week. We're calling for those to be renewed and expanded. We're talking about the National Endowment for the Arts. Not a big program, not a lot of money, but critical to communities. The EPA Office of Sustainable Communities, you heard John Roberts say he went to Huntington to deliver technical assistance. You heard Mayor Reichert talk about how a technical assistance grant started off their programs. That's the program. You put the word sustainable in a program and it might be eliminated. And my firm is named Sustainable Strategies. I believe in sustainability. Whatever we name it, we need to continue that kind of help. We have a couple new ideas, the public square grants to support the development of great public spaces through the National Park Service. And we're also talking about a HUD Anchor Institutions Initiative. EDS and MEDS, colleges and hospitals and other anchor institutions are critical to so many communities. For a decade, HUD has talked about an anchor institution initiative that can support planning that incorporates those kind of factories of the future, colleges and health care. We want to get it funded and provide grants to support those kind of anchor institution initiatives. Down under housing and neighborhoods, we have an affordable housing problem. We have affordable housing resources, but they need to be funded. The affordable housing tax credits are still there. They made it through the tax bill, but they were undermined in a way that's going to make them much less valuable to communities. We need to put those back on track. National Housing Trust Fund, we can look at HUD CDBG is always something cities need to defend. It needs to be expanded to the levels at which it has been historically. Aside from those things, we're talking about transit-oriented development, the TIFIA program and the RIF program that can help sponsor the development around train stations and bus stations and multimodal stations. And then, of course, green space is important. The Land and Water Conservation Fund has been authorized to be funded at $900 million a year. It doesn't get close to that. It's been going down over years. We need to be able to put land and water conservation funds into parks, trails, and green spaces. So we're calling for that in our blueprint. Okay. On the next slide, infrastructure. We're all talking about infrastructure. There's a call for by the president for $1.5 billion in infrastructure. Without getting into the complexity of that proposal, the call is to take away $200 million in existing infrastructure resources that are making a difference in communities, and then give them back in a much weaker way and expect localities and states to make up the rest of that, that 1.5 trillion. So take away $200 billion that makes a difference, and make states and localities and the private sector, replace that $200 billion and add up another 1.3 trillion. That doesn't work. We have a position paper on that. We're going to be active on this, and all these programs up there, I could go through all of them, but it would take too long. But for roads, fixing existing infrastructure, trails, transit, multimodal, all of these programs up there could make a difference on community economic development and community revitalization. We're calling for them to be funded at their full authorized levels, funded in a way that works for local governments, not just the biggest local governments, Sure. The Port of Los Angeles can float a public-private partnership and get Wall Street to finance a $1 billion expansion of the Port of Los Angeles. I don't think you're going to get trails and connectivity built in Macon by telling Wall Street to underwrite it. It's just not going to work, and we're not for that approach. We also believe in broadband. We've got what are called gigatowns for a new funding source for putting high-speed broadband into communities. Water and sewer is important, so we're looking at the EPA Clean Water and Drinking Water Funds. We're looking at the WIFIA tool to incentivize new infrastructure investment. You can look on firstandmain.org and see details on all of these, but mind you, infrastructure is in the Congress now. It's being debated. Mayors and county commissioners and town supervisors need to be behind the right approach to infrastructure investment. Okay, so we've got this big platform calling for the right kind of federal resources and investment. What are we going to do about it? In short, we're launching this today. We've already got 33 local elected officials ready to sign on. Now, mind you, those of you who are planners and county economic developers and Main Street directors and nonprofits that are supporting this, we want you involved too. You sign up at firstandmain.org and you can be part of this. But in order to move senators and Congress members and White House officials and agency leaders, we want local elected leaders to sign on. So go to your mayor, go to your county executive if you're on this phone call and say, hey, Chief, I think you should sign on. We've got 33 signed on now. We want 300 signed on by April 1st, and that's no joke. We are doing broad outreach in a lot of ways to do that, but you know what the best outreach is? Is for you to put an email out to the 5 or 6 mayors that you work with in your area, in your state, and say, brothers and sisters, we need to get on. You need to go to your county commission association in your state and say, I think we should get behind this. If each one of those 33 got 10 people to sign on, we would knock our goal out of the park. And if each of you signed on and got 2 or 3, we're actually asking for each person to sign on to get 3. I looked at the list. I know that there are at least 30 other local officials on this phone call right now. I'm sorry, local elected officials. There are hundreds of local officials on. We had 397 sign up, and we've got a couple hundred people on. You need to sign up by the time this call is done, and you need to ask your brother and sister local elected officials by the end of next week. You need to get on too. Let's get that 300. Okay, once we got a letter, a platform with 300 plus on, we're going to move out into the administration and its agencies and the Congress and start talking about this platform. We're going to be giving you draft letters to the editor and congressional letters and social media blurbs to move the message from the grassroots so that we can be strong here in Washington and in the congressional offices getting it done. We want all our friends to be part of this, but we're really targeting communities and signatures where we have House and Senate leadership, where we have chairs and ranking members and other leaders on the appropriations committees, on the Ways and Means and Finance committees, and on key authorization committees. So we're going to channel our focus where it can really make a difference. We need all of you on board. So we're recruiting local leaders now. We're doing congressional outreach. We're going to give you templates and times and messages that you can send through your own communication channels. And then we are going to be giving you requests and support for going into your congressional offices, meeting with your district director or meeting with the staff that you know already in your congressional and Senate district offices and say, have you seen the First and Main blueprint? I'm coming over to talk with you about it. We're going to go through it. We're going to talk about the projects that you know got built because they were catalyzed with these kinds of monies. We're going to talk with you about the grant that you helped us get that is making a difference for job training or downtown revitalization. And we're going to tell you that if you kill these programs, you're killing these opportunities. When can we meet? And then that all leads up to the end of really our first leg of this First and Main campaign. The first leg is launching today on March 1. It's coming to a head on April 23rd and 24th, when we will have a fly-in to Washington, where we would like to bring as many of you as possible, no fewer than 50 local elected leaders to Washington to be part of a get-together where we are collaborating, and then we're going to go down to the Hill. We're going to go to federal agencies in the White House, and we're going to say, we're America's local leaders from America's heartland communities. We've got a blueprint for staying strong, and we want you to be partners. That's our game plan for this kickoff of First and Main, and we hope you can be part of it. So you can sign on today there at firstandmain.org. Up at the top, there's a how to join, it's time to go. So I think I've done my part on this webcast, and it's time to bring up one last leader, local government leader, the mayor of John Robert. If you're there, you can introduce our next guest.
Yes, I'm here, Matt. And Matt, thank you for taking us through that. And I want to emphasize to you, it does not cost you or your city a single dime to be a part of this. This is an effort we all believe in. It's a life's work for most of us. We need your voices. Doesn't cost you a dime. You've been sent an email that you can simply respond, yes, I want to be a part. You can click on the link that was sent to you, signing on. I urge you to do that while you're stopped, while you're on this call. And I certainly want to hear your story and see you when you come to D.C. I want to introduce our next speaker, and then I've got to pop off because I've got to get in line to board a plane to Birmingham where I do my next work. I have not met the mayor of Gretna personally, but I know her part of the world well, and its rich, deep culture there in South Louisiana. And I want to now bring up Mayor Belinda Constant, Gretna, Louisiana. Prior to coming to elected office, she had a career in the Louisiana court system as a court reporter, an educator, and a leader of alternative sentencing programs. In 2005, the mayor was elected as the first woman to the Gretna City Council, where she focused her attentions on the revitalization of the city's downtown, and those efforts led her to run for and be elected Gretna's first female mayor in 2013. And I'm going to ask Mayor Constant now to talk about why it is so important for the local leaders on this call to get involved, and she's going to share some of the stories, as you've heard from other mayors, about the First and Main program and what they've meant to her. And I want you to remember, if you're a mayor or an elected official, you sign on now. If you're not, sign on, but go to your mayors and your council members or supervisors and get them to sign on as well. Mayor Constant?
Thank you, John Robert. Thank you, John Robert. I appreciate that, and thank you for having me today. As he just said, yes, I am Belinda Constant, the mayor of actually the smallest city represented on this call. Our city is about 18,000 in population, and we're directly situated on the river, I guess, as rivers go, the Mississippi River, which is the greatest river, if not one of the greatest rivers in the world. And we are right across the river from downtown New Orleans. So although we're only 18,000 strong, we feel like a much larger city due to our location. We feel that we are the example of small town America. And as I said, situated on the Mississippi, I think I can speak for many of the cities that are similarly situated on the river, as we, all developed in Middle America relative to the waterway and then the rail. We have a unique identity here in Gretna, as we're a small town, but as again I said, in a much larger field because of our location. We have numerous historic and post-war neighborhoods in the city, which is around a great downtown core, all displaying unique architecture with a laid-back community vibe. We have the privilege here of hosting numerous festivals, community events, and markets such as farmers market and art markets year-round. And we're home, as Zatarans may say, they live in New Orleans, but just to give you all a heads up, they're actually located in our city of Gretna, Louisiana, the largest spice maker in the world. And we also host the Jefferson Parish seat of government here, so we pride ourselves in being known as the capital city of Jefferson Parish, second only to New Orleans here in the state of Louisiana. You know, we are a smaller city, as we've been talking about small and mid-sized cities for the last several minutes, and we always seek to energize our downtown core, promote our economic development opportunities throughout the city, and that means connecting our residents as well to jobs and quality neighborhoods. We work toward improvement through connectivity and viability of our neighborhoods, and the place-based strategies and investments, which is best practices in 2018, and this is largely due to green infrastructure projects, drainage projects, and corridor enhancements and the like. We depend, as everybody just said, on strong federal partners. The projects that we take on would not be possible without some collaboration in federal aid. We are definitely dependent in order to be able to advance our community interest and do what we need to do relative to sustainability and resiliency principles. We must be heard at the federal level. You know, just as the mayor spoke about not being a community of chance but a community of choice, today we are a city of choice in our area. And we do a lot of planning with all of these initiatives in mind, in planning for future generations with green infrastructure and such being a part of that. Talking about some of the projects that we've been involved in with federal leveraged monies is Zatarans. That's the biggest one I probably can point to, because several years ago Zatarans wanted to do a major revitalization of their company, and it dealt with having to enlarge the manufacturing component of what they do. Next door to Zatarans was a former Malter chemical site that was a contaminated property and had several environmental issues. But for the EPA Brownfield Resources, who assisted us with the early stages of that plan, as well as the assessment and testing, and ultimately the remediation, we would have lost Zatarans to another location, probably outside maybe the state of Louisiana. This site was sold to the adjacent Zatarans facility, who has expanded their production operations within the city of Gretna, and that gave us the ability to grow one of our primary sources of quality jobs with benefits. Also, the second project that I want to illustrate is what we call the 25th Street Resiliency District. This district is comprised of about 1,000 homes. The district is framed around reduced flooding risk in our area of the city because, as most of you know, in this area of this country, we deal largely with repetitive flood losses. And in this area, in the 25th Street Resiliency District, this is one of the highest concentrations of repetitive loss properties in the country that we have identified. Working with LA Safe, which is a part of CDBG, as you heard earlier, to support environmentally sound approaches to stormwater management and addressing critical community design deficits in the neighborhood, but for us being able to have a voice at that table, this project and this area of our city would go unnoticed, would not be a viable place for home ownership, and we don't know what the future would hold for 1,000 homes located in the area. This funding would represent only roughly half of the total project cost, but without it, we would be absolutely unable to proceed. Combined projects in the district will connect these neighborhoods to each other, better recreational amenities, and reduce flood risk, and prohibitively high flood insurance rates, which is something critical, again, to our area. This would make the neighborhood more viable and secure its future inside the city limits of Gretna. Downtown drainage projects, again talking about leveraging funds. Our downtown drainage improvements that we've embarked on only because of the technical assistance that we've been able to leverage with EPA and CDBG funds. This project, again, is a result of having to deal with stormwater management, a true risk relative to our downtown area, and we do it and we are able to do it now because of CDBG. Without those critical funds, we would not be able to complete the much-needed drainage work in our downtown area. So these funds, as I just spoke about, represents the result of this catalytic project for our city, and will showcase new ways for the region with combined sound stormwater management practices and other infrastructure demands. It would meet both of those. We've right now in the middle of talking about a West Bank art opportunity, calling it the West Bank Art Walk, which is a collaboration with New Orleans in Algiers Point, connecting the East Bank to the West Bank. And this is currently positioned in the National Endowment for the Arts. Our Town Grant Program is something that we've reached out for in order to leverage the attention we need to be able to create this opportunity to the large scale that it is. All of these, as I've just pointed out, and many more would not be possible without a strong federal partnership. We need these programs intact to push our communities into engaging more with sustainable and resilient future. We cannot afford to be left behind in these conversations. And without these programs, all of the most exciting projects happening in our city would not be possible. You know, great things can happen in small packages, we always know. Without being federally funded, we could not have the viability and sustainability of quality of life that we need in order to be a viable city. Local government leadership has to get involved, and we need to get involved now. You know, Mayor, I know from Macon, I believe you're still on the line. I know you had to leave. And while the infamous Ray Charles talked about Georgia being on his mind, it's only up to us to make sure that every city represented has a voice, and we are on the minds of every elected leader from Washington to your local governments. We need to get involved. Yes. So with threats to the critical infrastructure, you've heard all about it earlier from others, and threats to local governments, especially with us that we're dealing with, as most of you may be dealing with in your capital cities with local funds, and the promise of $131 billion of new federal spending, we must energize ourselves. We're dependent on each one of you on the call, every local leader, we can't say it enough, to demand the investment in our communities today. We are the closest reality and the closest elected body to the people, all of the people, and the combination of all of the people who live in middle-sized cities and small cities probably exceeds the total population of the larger cities across our country. These infrastructure problems, the exorbitant matches that we need to come up with, we know is critical. We cannot afford to do that without federal leverage. And the First and Main campaign is the local government's voice on these important matters. It's a call to action today. That's what this is about. I appreciate Smart Growth America in bringing this forward, and I'm thankful to this initiative of First and Main campaign. We need an organized effort, because every day the organized minority can change the complacent majority every day of the week. So we need at this point to control our destiny in small town and mid-sized America. We need to be able to know that our voice is being heard. We can do it. We can do it through First and Main. We can do it in numbers. And we can make sure that every one of our cities are represented financially in a way that has never happened before. So I'm going to ask you now, go to the website, educate yourself about First and Main. Go get the information needed, ask the questions so that you're comfortable in calling on all of your local elected officials and others who care about small town America. And then join the coalition at the website or by replying to the email that you've received during this webinar. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate every one of you that has taken your precious time to get on this call, and I'm excited, as well as everyone else represented on this phone, as to what we can accomplish through the voices of all of us.
Fantastic, Mayor Constant. Everybody should join with that great invitation. We appreciate Mayor Reichert, Mayor Williams, Mayor Constant, and Mayor John Robert Smith for all you've done. This is Matt Ward again. I'm going to close out the webcast by just saying, look, we have seen a bunch of people have joined as we've sat here, but all of you better join right now, and or we'll come find you. We have your emails, and we will come find you. So thank you for that. We also have gotten a number of questions entered in electronically. I'm going to just quickly hit those. We don't have much time left, so I'm going to hit them fast. Somebody said, shouldn't we be contacting the red states to be able to do this because the Republicans are in charge? The answer is yes, definitely, but we need everybody in Congress to be able to support us. You need 60 votes in the Senate to get things done. That's going to involve Democrats, and you know what? Your Democratic Congress member or senator can be a champion for these, can help bring these to the attention of those who are debating these things and can make a difference. So we really need all of you, but don't worry, to that questioner, we are definitely targeting leadership in the Congress, the Senate, and the committees who are Republicans and who currently hold control in the Congress. Second, somebody said, this looks like it has a really Southern focus, despite the accents on the webcast here, which might have been Southern, and as somebody from West Virginia, I appreciate that. We are looking for folks from all over. I saw we got a sign up from Beaverton, Oregon today, and that's the least Southern city, that's joined so far. The honest truth is that we are trying to appeal all over the country, from California to New York, from Maine to Florida, and in between, and that's why you're being invited. Don't worry, this is not a Southern campaign. This is a nationwide campaign. Next, somebody asked about, isn't the reason that CDBG is being cut is because of abuses and waste in that program? Hey, I know in story after story about the positive power of what the Community Development Block Grant program has done, and we are defending it. But if you look at the First and Main Blueprint, you'll see we are also calling on, we are going to be working to improve programs that aren't working as well as they should be. And frankly, to work with this administration and the Congress, we need to be willing to say, okay, where things aren't working, we're willing to engage with you and make them more effective. That doesn't mean cut them down to the bone, but it does mean make them work better. We are committed to that in several programs. We've talked about that at the EDA. We've talked about that at the USDA, and we can talk about that at HUD as well. Okay, somebody asked about, isn't the horse out of the barn on tax credit legislation? And the answer is yes, the tax bill was signed into law just before Christmas 2017, but some of the key housing, historic preservation, new market tax credits, and other things that we depend on in our communities are not going to last past 2019 unless we are working to keep them to last. And this is a 2-year campaign that we think can build into a longer campaign to make sure the federal government is working well for localities. So we are a short time away from when key tax provisions could expire and leave us in the lurch, so we're working on that now. Somebody asked about whether the historic preservation tax credits are a priority. They are. They're in our platform, and they are a priority. And then I'm going to finish up with these two questions. Somebody asked about, if we're going to recruit our fellow local government leaders, can you help us with recruiting language and templates? And the answer is, email your fellow local government leaders that you know and say, look at firstandmain.org, and there's a blueprint there that you should get behind. You can click a button and join, and then you should call them and say, go to firstandmain.org, or I'll send you a PDF. But the answer is yes, we're happy to give you a sample recruitment email that will say, dear dear friend and brother mayor or sister county commissioner, here's a blurb that Smart Growth America will give you to recruit. And the last one is, shouldn't we be convening local government leaders in D.C.? Somebody asked that question. And the answer is put April 23rd and 24th on your calendar. You can go to our website and get more details. We're going to be sending out to everybody details about our first and main convening in Washington, D.C., April 23rd and 24th. In the meantime, sign the letter. We'll give you a lot of other materials. And with that, I think we're going to close the webcast and welcome you to First and Main. Thank you very much.